Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Tell Your Story with Data. Our presenter today is Michael Lawrence Green, who is a senior trainer here at CPS HR Consulting, and I'm Melissa Asher, the Director of Training and Development. I'm going to be helping to moderate the webinar this morning. Before we get started, I want to share some information about the webinar. All attendees are in listen-only mode to avoid interruptions to the session. You can still ask questions, though, and in fact, we're going to encourage you at several points throughout the webinar to use your Q&A panel to ask, or to respond, both, to different parts of the webinar discussion. So we'll have questions that we'll be asking your input from, and of course, if you have any questions at any time throughout the presentation, we want you to go ahead and type those in. We will be getting to those at the end of the presentation. We will make every effort to address all of your questions. Today's presentation is available as a handout in your webinar dashboard. We've got not only the PowerPoint, but also an additional handout that Mr. Michael Lawrence Green will be referring to periodically throughout the webinar so that you can follow along with us. We will also be forwarding a link to the recording and to the slide deck to all of today's attendees after the webinar has concluded. So rest assured, you will have access to all of those materials. So now, let's go ahead and get started. Michael?
Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Green. Today we're going to go Mach 2 with our hair on fire for the next hour, working on data. You say data, I say data, you say data. Data, potato. Yes, we're going to be doing a lot of different things about data and how to properly tell stories utilizing data. Now, to give you a little bit about my background, I've actually graduated from Cal State University in Northridge, mid-1980s, went to work for the Bank of New York in their mortgage operation on the West Coast, and about 10 years into it, the bank wanted out of the West Coast, and that gave myself a chance to ask myself two tough questions. First question I asked myself was, what happened when I'm 65 years of age? The only thing I ever knew was the mortgage business. Would I regret it? And what came back to me was, yeah, I'd probably regret it. And the second question I asked myself was, if I had 2 years left to live and I had to work, and besides sitting on a beach in Tahiti, saying, would you like an umbrella? Because that was my first choice. But my real choice was helping people become better. So about 22 years ago, I launched off into the training business, co-founded a company called Delta 4 that does work in the areas of leadership, teamwork, sales, performance, and competitive strategies and tactics. And about 14 years ago, I founded a company called Memory Spring that helps people with their memory and brain health. And I've also been doing work for CPS for about 13 years. And so today we're going to talk about data. And so I always like to start my data discussions with clients, basically, because, I go to a lot of different functions. I'm sure you've all heard of a company called Oracle. And every year I go to Oracle's Open World. And a couple of years ago, I went and sat in on a keynote where the president of EMC Software was talking. And he said by 2020, we're going to be managing about 6 times the amount of data that we're currently managing. Think about it, 6 times the amount of data that we're currently managing. If you really think about how much data we're dealing with at this moment in time, it's amazing. It's overwhelming. As a matter of fact, they measure everything. Even when a guy throws a fastball with his pinky extended, they measure it. And so it's getting to the point where we can't consume it. So this particular course is how do you present data in a persuasive way, and in such a way that it helps people consume the data more effectively. And so that's what we're focusing on today. As a matter of fact, the other job that he mentioned coming out of college, the highest paying job coming out of college, he mentioned are going to be data analysts and data scientists. And that's because there are just not enough people out there to package the data and present it in such a way that makes it consumable to others and people can make decisions off of it. And so that's what we're looking at doing. And the other part of this thing, and why we go down the path of storytelling, is because people make decisions both on logic and emotion. And the big struggle for people is when they just see data, they struggle to tap into that data and buy into it. And the only way to get somebody to buy into data is through emotion. And so telling stories or storytelling builds emotion. All right, so given that, let's turn the page. Okay, so here are the objectives for today's session. Learn key principles to effectively tell stories with data. Number 2, gain insight into story structure. Number 3, identify the best graphics to effectively present data. Number 4, learn key tips to reduce clutter in your charts and graphs and have fun. Because for me, if we're not having fun, it's not worth doing. So, turn the page, please. Now, if you look at page 2 in your handout, we have a little psychological model. Because if you think about it, anytime you're trying to get people to buy into anything you want them to buy into, including data, it's a human element. It's about 80% of it comes from the psychological side. It's understanding humans and presenting things in a way that humans can consume it. So, given that, let's just fill in the center box, and the center box says change attitude. Now, in order to change attitude, you have to impact 3 things. The first thing you have to impact is the cognitive component, which are people's beliefs. The second element that you have to impact is the evaluative component, which are people's feelings about their beliefs. And the third component is the behavioral component, which are people's actions. Now, here's a big question. Can you see attitude? And how can you see attitude?
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of an interesting question. So this is your first opportunity to interact. We want you to answer this question. What do you think? So using your question and answer pane, can you see attitude? Give us a yes, a no, or maybe so, whatever that might be. And if you say yes, you can, then tell us how. How can you see attitude? Let's see what people are saying about that. Getting some yeses, getting some no's. Body language, behavior.
Body language and behavior.
Facial expression. By actions. Tone is telling.
Vocal tonality.
Vocal tone.
Anything else?
Let's see, mannerisms.
Okay.
I know we're getting some feedback that it's a little bit hard to hear the audio today. We are trying to do some things to improve that, so please do stay with us. Let's see, other thoughts, a lot of yeses, eye rolling, sighs, lots of different body language. Oh, here's some on the positive side. With enthusiasm, you can see enthusiasm in the way someone behaves.
So, and now, here's the big question. Is it actually is it actually attitude or is it behavior? Because we got plenty of people in our lives that we say, hey, I need A, B, C, and D, and on my desk by Friday at noon. They go, yes, thank you very much. And they show us all this positive body language. And then Friday at noon comes around, it's not there. Does that ever happen?
Yeah,
sure it happens. Sure it happens. I'll give you another example. I have a son named Max. Max is in college, and when he comes home from college, he works at a local martial arts camp. And Thursday, he's got one responsibility, and that's to take out the garbage. So he wakes up nice and early, 6 a.m. on Thursday morning, starts watching his favorite show, has his breakfast. I walk in, and I say, hey, Max, good morning, make sure you take out the garbage before you go to work. And he goes, okay, Dad, no problem. So I leave, come back about 15 minutes later, and what do you think's happened? What do you think's happened, Melissa?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing, right? So I go, okay, Max, come on, make sure you got to get out to the martial arts camp. You got to take care of all those big things, and all the little kids, you got to get them all pumped up to go to camp. And he goes, okay, don't worry, Dad, I'll take out the garbage. So I leave, come back about 15 minutes later, what's happened?
I'm an optimist, but I'm going to say nothing.
Nothing. That's right. So I go, Max, okay, it's over. Okay, if you can't do one simple thing, you're going to be walking back to college. He goes to school in Denver. You're going to be living out of a cardboard box. He says, I'm done. And I leave. And then he runs out the door, takes out the garbage, freaks out, takes out the garbage, comes back in, eats his food, and then goes off to camp. Following Thursday comes around. I walk in, Max is up nights early, and I walk in the door, and he goes, oh, you see, he goes, don't worry, Dad, I'll take out the garbage. And then I leave, I go, you know, I'm an awesome leader. I don't even have to say it anymore. I leave, come back about 15 minutes later. What's happened, Melissa?
He took the garbage out.
No, nothing. Okay, so based upon this model that we're looking at, where do you think I focus my time and energy? Beliefs, feelings, or actions? Where do you think, Melissa?
You were focused on the action.
That's right, it's focused on behavioral, but that only got me compliance for the moment. That didn't give me long-term change. The question then becomes, how do we get to those beliefs and feelings? If we see the behavior and we typically react to the behavior, how do we get to those beliefs and feelings? And the answer is through questioning. And so we have to find out what the person's beliefs and feelings are, whether it's taking out the garbage, or whether it's building a chart, or whether it's researching data and then presenting data to an audience. We've got to do a really good job of understanding what those beliefs and feelings are of the people that we're building this for. Because if we just build something we don't consider what's important to our audience, we might as well just put a blindfold over our eyes, hold a dart in our hand, do 3 little spins, and throw that dart hoping it's going to hit a dartboard. But in most cases, it won't. Because at the end of the day, anything that you build, any story you tell has got to be wrapped around what's important to your audience. And so you start looking at our day-long version, because remember, this particular class is just a very tiny sliver of a day-long class that focuses on storytelling with data or using data. And we work you hard on just knowing what's important to your audience, because that's where the magic is in telling any story.
So it doesn't matter what, you have all kinds of fantastic data. If you can't turn that into something that gets to someone's beliefs and feelings, you might not get the action that you want to based on that data.
You're absolutely right. And remember, storytelling taps emotion. But in order to tap emotion, you have to understand what's important to your audience. What gets people emotional, gets them excited, gets them enthused. And so that's where the magic is. All right, so Melissa. All right, so here's a little test for you. Now, Melissa's going to throw the first thing up, and you got to tell us, what do you see? So you'll type it in, and Melissa will.
Here we go.
There's the first one. So type in, what do you see in that picture?
Yeah. So let's see. What are you seeing out there? Oh, good. Young woman, young lady, young woman looking over her shoulder, a lady looking away, a lady looking backwards. Oh, an old woman, an old lady.
Oh, so
that's a little different. Is this an old woman or a young woman? We've got definitely a woman coming through, but young, old. Oh, I can see both.
There you go. There's a classic picture, and there's both an old woman and a young woman in that picture. And the old woman is looking away, and the young woman is looking away, and the old woman is looking straight down with the fur on her shoulder. All right, let's go to the next one. What do we see with the next picture?
Ooh, this one's a little different. What do you see out there in this one? A couple mariachi players, old people, 2 singers, guitar players. Right off the bat, we've got 2 different pictures here. Old couple as well as the mariachis, a goblet.
Oh, you see the goblet. You picked up the goblet.
Chalice. Ooh, I like chalice, vase, goblet. Yeah, a lady in the back.
That's right, coming out of the ear of the old man.
Wow, they're picking up on all the things in here.
All right, good. All right, let's go to the next one.
All right. Here we go. What about this third one? What are you seeing here? Chewbacca.
Chewbacca.
A spirited guy. A kissing couple.
Oh, somebody saw the kissing couple.
A man with a wreath. Yeah, two people kissing. Double the beard. Ivy. Anything else coming out of this one?
Most people miss the kissing couple. It looks like the kissing couple are in embrace and they're surrounded by the big wreath. All right, now the last one.
Ta-da!
Okay, so find the hidden tiger in that picture. Find the hidden tiger in that picture.
So everybody sees the main tiger.
But where's the hidden tiger?
Oh, someone's got it.
Not yet. Let's see what the rest of it.
Oh, a couple people have got it. Yeah.
All right, give it to them.
Okay, it's writing on the tiger. It's in the tiger's stripe.
That's right. It's the hidden. It says the hidden tiger right in the stripes of the tiger. So I would venture to guess that all of us missed something out of the 4 pictures. We didn't see everything in the 4 pictures. We had our own angle that we saw things, and that's our human nature because we all see the world in our own unique way, and it's been established based upon the lenses or the filters that we have in front of us. Mm-hmm. And so consequently, we have to be mindful of that. Because think about your audience. If you don't know your audience really well, they're only going to see the things that they think they're seeing, but in most cases, they're missing stuff. And we have to be able to connect the dots for them through storytelling. Because at the end of the day, we can't expect them, especially with data, to connect the dots in the way that we intend them to connect the dots. That's why through storytelling and how we present data, we have to actually connect the dots for them. All right, Melissa, turn the page. Okay, so if you look in your manual or your handout, and you go to page 3, these are the 4 elements of the day-long storytelling or tell your story with data class. The first component that we focus on is we do a light touch on data. Now, this is not a data analysis class. We have other classes that are data analysis, even though we're going to do a light analysis piece in this class. It's really not a data analysis class. It's a class that helps people present data in such a way that it persuades and people can consume it. And so we're only going to do a light touch on data. Then we do a heavy push on storytelling in the one-day class. We do a heavy push on data graphics, and then we do a heavy push on presenting your data. The reason being is no matter how beautiful, no matter how detailed your charts are, no matter how perfect it might seem, 20 to 25% of the people out there are going to misinterpret your charts.
How many?
How many? 20 to 25% of your people will misinterpret the charts. Thank you for asking that question again, Melissa. And so that's why the presentation piece is so huge in this particular class. All right? All right, turn page. All right, now, back up, Melissa. Just go back to the back up again, Melissa. There we go. Now, today, we're going to take a couple components from the storytelling module and a couple components from the data graphics module. That's what we're going to do today in the short 1-hour time period that we have. And so now that we're there, now you can turn the page. Now remember, data by itself, if you start thinking about this, people make decisions on both logic and emotion. Do they ever make decisions? Melissa, do they ever make decisions 100% on logic?
Yeah.
Probably not.
No.
No, probably not. What about emotion? Do we ever make decisions?
Yes, all the time.
Yes, okay, and then what happens after we've made an emotional decision, Melissa?
Then we go back and we look at all the data as to why we probably shouldn't have made that decision so quickly.
Well, yeah, sometimes we regret it, but once we get past the regret and that we want to take it back or whatever, then we do a little logic change to support our emotional decision of why we made that emotional decision. And so there's always logic and emotion in everything, including data. And the best way to tap emotion in data is through storytelling. And so if you start taking a look at what the story is, now we turn the page and go to page 5 in our book. That gives us the beginning, what makes a good story. So first thing is, click, it's interesting to the audience. Remember, it's got to mean something to the audience. As a matter of fact, in my class, we talk about needs and wants, which are components of logic and emotion. And if you build, and this, you might want to write this down, this is just psychological math. If you build a story that addresses 0 needs of your audience, especially a data story, then you have a 0% chance that they're going to buy into your presentation. You got that? Melissa, you understand that? 0 for 0. Yeah. If you don't consider anything that's important to your audience, then they're not going to buy in, no matter how beautiful, no matter how great the story is, no matter how clean the data is. Now, if you build a story, a data story that addresses one want/need of your audience, you have a 25% chance that they're going to buy into your presentation. Okay, so that's still, the odds still aren't great, but at least you have some percentage of people that buy into your presentation. If you build a data story that addresses 3 wants/needs of your audience, then you have a 50% chance they're going to buy into your presentation. And if you build a data story that addresses 5 or more needs/wants of your audience, then you're going to get an 80% buy-in on your story. So Melissa, how many wants/needs? Not 4, yes, 5. That's right, 5. That's absolutely right. So, given that, that's why it has to be interesting to the audience. And by the way, we've all seen data presentations where they do 500 slides in 20 minutes, and they never consider what was important to us, and we melt down after the first 2 slides. And we've all been there. So in building your own presentations that's going to include data, make sure you do your homework, and again, understand what's important and relevant to your audience. All right, the second thing is, it adds value to the topic. So in other words, people actually learn something. Because as humans, again, learning is a motivator. So we always want to build that in. And it's that, you know, we know in most cases people know what they know, but then all of a sudden they really get motivated when they find out certain things that they don't know, and it's those last things where they didn't even know that they didn't know it that gets them motivated and going to the next level. All right, let's go to the next one. Valid research information, especially with data, is vital. And so, because once you put that data together, you got to stand your ground and support that data. So you better put in the time to research it and put in the details so it means something to people. All right, the next one. And it's got to be presented in an engaging way. And in order to be engaging, it's got to be meaningful to your audience, because no matter how dynamic you are, if it means nothing to your audience, then you're not going to engage them. As a matter of fact, engaging also means that you get them involved. If you're telling a story and they can even play a role in the story, that's kind of fun too. But get them engaged and keep them busy, and, you know, tie it to what's important to them. All right, and the story has to be complete. It's got to have the beginning, middle, and end. And we're going to get into story structure in a couple minutes, and actually that's coming up right now. But it's got to have the beginning, middle, and end. Unless you want to leave them hanging until the next time that you're going to see them, you do that, like, you know, so people can feel like they're binge watching you. But cliffhangers, cliffhangers. But and we all go through that when we watch Netflix or something like that, right? They leave you hanging at the end. You could do that, but probably with a data story, you probably need to give them a beginning, middle, and end.
Well, so Michael, let's ask the group. I mean, if they think about their audiences, their typical audiences, for you listening in today, what makes a good story for your audience, in your experience?
That's a good question.
What do you think going into this? Think about the stories you're telling, the information you're sharing. What makes it interesting for your audience? Relevant information, with them, what's in it for them, showing how it pertains to their program, relatable, historical perspective, timeliness, not speaking too fast, adding inflection, the impact it has on others, compelling, accurate response to their questions. Yeah, that's a good point. Relatable, stories that people can remember and retell. Yeah, right? So not so complicated that nobody can remember it. Aligning with their beliefs, relevant. Okay, good. I think those are great examples and ties right in with what you're saying, Michael.
Absolutely. All right, turn the page. So actually, we're going to stay on the bottom of page 5 and look at what needs to be in a story or story ingredients. So the first thing that you have to have in a story is a theme. So it's all wrapped around what are we trying to tell the people, and what we can help us in our own lives. Even a data presentation has a story to it. It has a beginning, middle, and end. There's always a theme. The second thing is the plot. So that's the conflict or the struggle that we had. And by the way, when you start looking and building your story, remember, you could be the main subject of the story. It could be your theme that you're working through. It could be your conflict when you're working on a data challenge. It could be a conflict related to the audience or an individual subject that we're researching. I mean, it could be a lot of different things, but it has to have some sort of conflict or struggle or challenge to it. All right, go to the next one. Okay, so every story has to have structure, beginning, middle, and end. And by the way, on the next slide, we're going to actually take a look at a story structure model that we can look at, a template to use. All right, and then the characters. Story has to have characters. Now, it could be an individual that's part of the data set that you're researching, or you could be the character in the story and how you analyze something, you found some sort of challenge, and how you ended up doing additional research, and here's what we found. So you could actually be the character. But whatever story you tell, you have to at least develop the character and give them a little bit of, give them a little bit of insight into that character's belief system and what's important to them. All right, and then you have to have some sort of setting. So you have to have some sort of setting that sets the stage for what's going on. It could be a certain year. It could be a certain conflict that's going on in the community. It could be a certain theme that we're seeing out there in the marketplace or the subject area that we're studying. It could have a lot of different components, but you need to establish some sort of setting that people can tie to. And then it has to have style and tone, and I'm all about putting your own style and tone to this thing. Any story you tell has to really come from you, and you're the one that kind of establishes your uniqueness and your unique style and tone that fits for you, and also has to fit for your audience. So going back to knowing what style and tone is going to match well with your audience is really important. All right? All right, so now turn the page. Now you don't have this story structure in your manual, but if you have printed out the handout, you can write it down in your manual or just look at the different statements in here. And if we need to, we can send them the story structure.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so the first part of the story structure slide tells you once upon a time something was happening at that point in time. It could be that we were studying a certain data set and we were doing certain things, and every day we actually would research this information and report it to management, let's just say, and report it to the community. So it's just establishing what the norm was for our world. And then something happened. But one day something happened. For instance, you could say, one day we found a discrepancy in the data, and actually the public notified us there is a discrepancy in the data. And then given that, right, you notice because of that, certain things occurred. So obviously,
the newspaper got a hold
of it. And all of a sudden it was in the public forum and there were angry people. And then we made, and ever since then, we made certain changes. That would be the bottom section. And everybody was happy after we made those changes. And so, again, you can do a lot of different things with it. This is just a nice basic framework to help you start to put some structure to the story. Now, again, it's only to set your story up, and then you can add all the color and flavor to it once you put some sort of structure around it. All right? All right, turn the page. All right, so here's some tips for effective storytelling. Number one, keep it real. Again, as much as we like to get really pie in the sky and stuff like that, it's got to be realistic for your audience and realistic for you. Okay, number two is create a great beginning. You got to grab them with something, whether it's certain data that they might not know about that's going to grab their attention, or it's the pacing that you delivered at the beginning, or whatever it is, you got to grab them right out of the gate with something.
Yeah, I like how, like, in this presentation, Michael, you said only, was it 25% of people are going to understand? 25% of people will not understand. You will lose 25% of people across the board.
Yeah, no matter how beautiful your chart and graph is, no matter how much detail, 20 to 25% of the people out there are going to misinterpret it.
Yeah, so that's a good way to use, I think, a statistic in the beginning.
That's right. Some sort of statistic would make it jump out real. All right, let's go to the next one. Keep it simple. Now remember, in data presentations, it's your job to take what appears to be complex and make it simple. Remember, people buy into simple. They don't buy into complex because then they melt down and get into overanalysis paralysis. So the thing is that it's your job to present it in such a way that it's simple and consumable so people can make decisions off of it. All right? And then generate the right emotion. Remember, I mentioned it earlier today, early in this presentation, people make decisions both on logic and emotion. And the same thing with data. If we think they're going to move just because of the data, that's not true. We've got to put some sort of emotion into it or tap some emotion. That's why we use storytelling. You tap emotion. Now, here are 3 questions I always ask myself before I build a data presentation. The first question is, what am I trying to accomplish with my presentation? That's the first question I ask myself, or I write down that question and try and answer that. The second thing is, what do I want them to do with the data? Do I want them to run out and go contact their congressman? Do I want them to start fundraising? What is it I want them to do after they leave my presentation? And the third question, which is extremely important, is how do I want my audience to feel? That's the emotional piece that we got to tap with our story. Do I want them to be happy? Do I want them to be sad? Do I want them to be angry? Do I want them to be inflamed? Do I want them to be melancholy? What do I want them? How do I want them to feel? So those 3 questions are really valuable questions anytime you build a story to ask yourself. Okay? All right, so let's go to the next one. And then analogies and metaphors are always good, but keep them short and don't overwhelm people with too many in one presentation. 1 or 2 analogies are great. You start to overdo it, it kind of freaks people out a little bit. All right, and the last one is stick the ending. Now, stick the ending is you're going to focus on those things you want them to remember at the end, and keep it down to no more than 3 to 5 key points that you're going to repeat at the end. Because remember, humans can only remember about 3 to 5 things. Over 3 to 5 things, they start to lose it. And I'm a 3 key point guy, especially at the end. Here's what we're going to focus on. Here's what I want you to remember from this story. So it's, and again, humans can only remember about 3 to 5 things at any given time. So I like to keep it to 3. And then really hammer those 3 key points throughout the presentation. All right.
All right. So, Michael, you've done a really good job of setting context here. We've talked about the storytelling aspect. important things to keep in mind. Sometimes these things collide when we have lots of data. So why do you think, and we're going to ask this to the audience now, why do you think people struggle, or what do you think they struggle with when they're looking at data that makes what Michael's talking about difficult to do? What do you think? What is more challenging when looking at data? Yeah, being overwhelmed with too much information. Yeah, understanding the context, understanding how it pertains to their business. Too much and confusing data. They're left to interpret it on their own. Yeah, interpreting it correctly, which is what you said, Michael, making sense of the numbers. Not only making sense of just the numbers, but then trying to make sense of the relevancy of the numbers. Not getting to the point. Like some people just get, like, what's the point? There's a bunch of numbers. And that there is sometimes just no story. There's just nothing around the data, so people are left somewhat on their own. Yeah, great observations.
Yeah, great observation. So that's the small slice that we took out of the storytelling portion of the class. Now we're going to focus on actually the data analysis piece and graphs and charts. So now you turn to page If you turn to page 8, we're going to give you some tips for cleaning up your charts. Now, let's just do a little quick statement on charts and graphs. We've all been in presentations where somebody puts a graph up on the wall and they start talking, and it takes us half an hour to orient to the chart, and then we never heard anything that they said. And so the ability for your audience to orient quickly is a vital component in any data presentation, whether it has a story associated with it or you're just showing charts and graphs. You're going to be speaking to those charts and graphs. And so the easiest for your audience to orient to quickly are 4 types of charts, actually 3 types. Bar charts, pie charts, and actually it goes bar charts, histograms on the screen, but a histogram is just another form of a bar chart. And what do you think, and just respond on the screen, the difference between a bar chart and a histogram is?
Yeah, what do you think? The difference between the bar chart and the histogram? Maybe timeline, historical data. What's on the axes?
Yeah, what else?
Histograms group data sets like age ranges. So the grouping, how the data is grouped.
Okay. All right, so that's good. All right.
One's vertical, one's horizontal.
Okay, so that's good. It's good that we got a lot of different inputs on this thing. Now, if you go back, Melissa, bar charts are categorical in nature. So if you notice on the x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, you really don't have any numerical component to it. That's why you see different bars sitting out there, and there are gaps between the bars, just because they're categorical in nature. Now, Melissa, if you flip over to the histogram, histograms have some sort of numerical component in the x-axis or the horizontal axis that are tied numerically to that component. And so that's the difference between bar charts and histograms. So the histogram is just another version of a bar chart. All right, so go to the next one. Pie charts. People orient to pie charts very, very quickly. And then the last one is line charts. So these 3 types of charts, bar charts / histograms, pie charts, and line charts are the easiest for your audience to orient to very quickly because they see them all the time. And it makes it easy for you to start to tell a story if you use something that they can get to really quickly and start to derive some meaning. And so it's all about drawing the eye to drawing your audience's eyes to the right place when you're telling the story. All right. Now, oops, here we go again. Bar chart, categorical nature, histogram, quantitative in nature. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so here's bar chart again, and then there's the histogram again. All right, so now let's take a look at some tips for cleaning up your charts. Remember, we're trying to get it to a point to where people can orient to your chart very, very quickly. Now, say this out loud wherever you're sitting. White space is good.
White space is good.
Say it one more time.
White space is good.
One more time.
White space is good.
There you go. The biggest challenge for most people in creating.
Yes, thank you for those who typed along with us.
I like that. You typed in white space good. Most of the time we have too much clutter on our charts. And so again, most of us have BSOS, bright, shiny object syndrome. And so we get distracted really, really quickly. And so the more little distractions you put on your chart, the less likely the person is going to focus on the things you want them to focus on when you're telling your story. So without looking at any tips right now, the first thing is you just got to be mindful, keep it clean, lots of white space, only show the things you're going to speak to in the story. Okay? All right, so now here's some clutter tips, 10 tips for reducing clutter in your charts. And the first 7 are from Annie Cushing, who's the senior SEO at Seer Interactive. The first one is, she says, remove the grid lines. So here's a bar chart that we're looking at with grid lines. And she's saying if you don't need detailed accuracy to make the bars pop, remove the grid lines. So let's see that, Melissa. There we go. Now, if you need detailed accuracy, that's a different story. But if you're, let's say, going to just focus on the first 4 or the last 4 or something, you're just trying to point out the differences, then you probably don't need those grid lines. And by the way, when we look at each one of these recommendations, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You might not agree with her on these tips, but these are tips that have been proven to work over and over again. So again, try it both ways. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Move the legend. Okay, so we're going to look at a pie chart where the legend's on the right. That's the traditional pie chart with a traditional legend on the right. And she's saying, why does it have to stay on the right? Why not put it on the bottom where we center the pie even more? And so, again, using the eye of the beholder, but in this case, she tried to center the pie more so, and then if you click again, Melissa, you can see the comparison between the two pies. All right, go to the next one. Tip number 3 is reduce clutter, is to eliminate single legends. If you have only one data set, you really don't need a legend because the actual data set will be explained in your title of the chart. All right, let's go to the next one. Add a descriptive title. So here's, before Melissa clicks, here is that same bar chart we saw at the beginning, but in this case, it has an impressions title, and what do we think this is of? I mean, it says, what did it say, Melissa, there?
Halloween costume,
You read them out.
Cleopatra, cowgirl, gangster, couple's costume, toga.
Toga. What else?
Pirate, Halloween 2012, Batman, Halloween costume ideas, baby Halloween costume, pirate costume, Elmo, dog costume. I don't know.
So what do you think, everybody, what do you think that is?
Yeah, what is that?
What do you think that is?
Costume Palooza.
Costume Palooza. I like that too. Costume Palooza.
Yeah. Like, any other thoughts? I mean, I don't know.
Okay, let's see what it is. Okay, so impressions for top query terms for October 2012. Google Webmaster Tools, right? In many cases, we do not put a detailed enough title on our charts, and that leaves too much room for misinterpretation.
Shout out to a couple of folks who actually said search terms.
Yeah, search terms.
Yep, right on. But how much easier is it if it's in the title?
Yeah, so you want to put descriptive, and in many cases, you need a second line underneath your title with more detail in it, so that people are looking at it in the way that you intended them to look at it. All right, click the next one and see there's two differences. Sort data prior to charting. Now this is for bar charts, and take a look at the first one. Okay, that's not sorted. So there's your bar chart, and then the next one is sorted. Now in this case, we're going from largest to smallest, and that's how we're going to tell the story. Now, anytime you build any kind of chart, you're always starting it, especially in the U.S., from left to right, because that's normal human conventions. So if you're trying to tell a story and you're relating it to largest to smallest, then you're going to sort it from largest to smallest, because people are going to go from the left and work their eyes to the right. And so that makes it really easy for you to tell a story. But if they're trying to emphasize the smallest and how it compares to the largest, then you might reverse it. But at least that sorting works really well. All right, turn to the next one. Reduce head tilting. Now, the biggest issue that we run into in bar charts and different types of charts is we start to tilt people's heads. This is head tilting. The minute you start to tilt your audience's head on a data set, you start losing them. Their ability to evaluate and analyze the chart starts to go in a quick way so that they're still paying attention to your story, starts to go out the window very, very quickly. About 20, just on an angle kind of thing, you're losing 50% of your audience right out of the gate because they have to angle their head and start to look at it. All right, let's take a look at another version. This version is a mess because all of a sudden now you're going to lose 80 to 90% of your audience because it's going to take them a significant amount of time to look at each particular category, and you're never going to get them at that particular angle. So her recommendation is just to turn it. Now instead of a vertical bar chart, we have a horizontal bar chart. All right, and then the next one is clean up your axis. All right, so in this particular case, she's looking at the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, and she's saying it's too messy. Going 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120 is too much. Now, unless you need detail accuracy. If you need detail accuracy, you might keep in those smaller numbers, but if you don't, again, based upon the story you're going to tell, she takes out the 20s. So click it, and that cleans it up a little bit more. All right, now the next three we're going to look at are from Presentation Pro, and these are just some tips that you can do in basic forms of Microsoft Excel to clean up and draw the eye of your audience quickly. So the first one is smooth it out. In this particular case, he's going to focus on Bob, and he's going to, or I shouldn't say he, I should say they are going to focus on Bob. And so what they want to do is draw your eye to Bob first because they want to tell Bob's story. So watch what they did. See how they smoothed out Bob's line. So that draws your eye to Bob really, really quickly. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Differentiate the segments. Sometimes we don't want them to start at the left, and we want to work against normal conventions. So in this figure case, we're going to change the line style for the third segment. Wait, what did you do, Melissa? Relax. Melissa, you're not supposed to go there yet. Back up. Back up. All right, good, Melissa. All right, good. All right, so this time we're going to focus on the third segment, which is the far right segment, because that's where we want to draw their eye fastest. So now, Melissa, you can push the button. See, there's the dotted line. And so that just draws your eye to that differentiated segment, and then you can tell the story from there. And in most cases, like the dotted line means prognostication. And so, but in this case, we don't know because it's not in the legend, but that you know, at least draws our eye to that point. All right, and the last one we're going to focus on is change the line style. So this one's going to focus on Martha. Martha right now is in the green. And so given that, let's see what they do to change the line style. Melissa, what do you think they did to change the line style?
They really emphasized Martha. They put some arrows, and for Rob and Bob, they kind of muted them.
Yeah, they muted them. They took out the data points so you can still speak to the relationship, so you can still speak to the relationship, but now you're telling Martha's story and how she relates to others. All right, so let's go to the next thing. So those are some tips. All right, go ahead, ask the question, Melissa.
So I know we're moving fast here, and we've shared a lot of tips. What we wanted to really illustrate is by making a few changes to the way you present your data, you can really highlight your story. So of the tips we've shared, is there one that you think is your favorite, or one that you think you could use to make your charts pop and to really tell your story? What did you like? The line styles. Oh, aesthetically pleasing colors. That's a good point. Speaking of data points as characters in the story, like removing the grid lines. Yeah, it's amazing. Moving the legend, right? You don't think about it, but it's simple, it's effective. White space is good. Thank you. Yes. Muting the unimportant data. Yeah, simplicity, the colors, changing the styles, the font. Sometimes it's difficult to fit something in, but change the font so that it's a better fit. Avoiding the head tilting. That one's getting some nods.
That's good.
Jesus, how great. Okay, good. So it seems like these tips are something that you all can put into practice.
All right, so given that we're going to wrap up, I'm just going to give you a few memorable presentation keys. Now, this is not in your manual, so you're going to want to write it down somewhere. But we'll quickly go through those memorable presentation keys to make your presentation more memorable. Number one is be yourself. We all try to get up and do a presentation, but most of the time we're not truly ourselves and being authentic in front of our audience. But that's truly what connects people with us and our story. For me, it took me many years to get through that because I always wanted to be like my mentors, but I never truly connected to my audience until I was this kind of whacked out, crazy, fast-talking kind of guy. That's the way I am now. And guitar playing too in my classes, but it's all about being authentic because that connects you with your audience the most effectively. Second thing is be organized. People can tell when you're not organized. And even though you might not be fumbling papers, if you don't have each step lined out in your presentation, it really, can be tough. And they can tell, and intuitively they can tell when you're not organized. Number three, be relevant. Tie it to your audience's needs. How many needs?
5.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that's right. Number 4, keep it simple. Remember, it's your job to take what appears to be complex and make it simple. Simple is memorable. Too complex, people don't remember anything of your presentation. So keep it simple and hammer those key points over and over again. All right, number 5, keep it moving. This is the biggest issue in most data presentations because you get into a data presentation, you put something out there and somebody goes, well, how did you get to that number? And then they start arguing with you over the number and they hijack your presentation. What was scheduled to be a 45-minute presentation ends up being an hour and a half, and everybody's like, why did I come to this meeting? So my strategy for that is anytime somebody starts to hijack your presentation, say, time out. Why don't we sidebar this after the meeting out of respect for everybody else? Why don't we sidebar this and discuss it after the meeting? Now, one of 3 things is going to happen. Number 1 is the person's going to come to you after the meeting, and you're going to have a really good conversation. They'll go, okay, thank you very much. I really like that information. I see how you got there. The second thing that might happen is that you go, after talking with them, we'll put it on as the first issue on the next meeting or next call. But the third thing, which is most likely, is that after the meeting, the person's going to come up to you and say, it wasn't that important. I got to go. I got another meeting. And so that's more likely. So sidebarring somebody that's starting to hijack your presentation is a valuable skill. Besides, it also sets the example for when somebody else is running a meeting, how you want that meeting to run. Right? It's that model the way principle. All right? And then use images and props. The logo goes a long way. Again, white space is good. That's all I have to say on that. And number 7, be enthusiastic. I live by that. People gravitate towards enthusiasm. As a matter of fact, my mantra is light yourself up and the world will light yourself up with enthusiasm and the world will come to watch you burn. And so that's my mantra. And so it's all about being enthusiastic, being excited about the data that you're focused on, being excited about the story you're telling, and people really gravitate to it, and they love that kind of thing. All right, and then bonus, remember to tap emotion. Anytime you build that data presentation, remember that third question I told you to ask. How do I want my audience to feel? All right, so now, just a reminder, the 4 key points in the day-long tell your story using data. We do a light push on data. We do a heavy push on storytelling, including storyboarding. We do a heavy push on data graphics, including color analysis and things like that. And we do a heavy push on presenting your story. As a matter of fact, the next CPS storytelling, tell your story using data class is October 24th. And so you can sign up for it whenever you want to sign up for it, but October 24th.
Okay, so we're kind of moving into a wrap-up here. We thought that this was just a nice little kind of summary and a nice visual, but it does have lots of white space.
It does. It's blue space, but lots of blue space.
So data satisfies the analytical part of our brains. As Michael started this presentation, data is all around us and increasingly larger volumes. Evidence-based practices are becoming more and more what people are using. So we're surrounded by data. We need to use data. How do we do that? We can do that more effectively through stories, which not only illustrate what's important about the data, but get to that emotion by touching someone's heart.
It's so beautiful.
So that's our last slide today. We have several questions that have come in. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and throw up some of these questions to Michael that have come in. One of the questions that came in early, Michael, was, when you're doing a presentation, you have data, you have charts, do you recommend having a printout of those charts and graphs in addition to maybe the PowerPoint?
So there's 2 schools of thought on that. The first school of thought is you don't give them anything when you're telling your story, because that's going to distract them from your story, because they're going to be focused on the handout. But if you're going to keep them focused on certain elements of the handout, you can get away with that, and especially for visual people and kinesthetic people, right? So you can do that, but in most cases, most people will tell you, tell your story first, focus up on the board, and then, in a matter of fact, give the handouts out after the presentation, so they have something to look at that reminds them of what you covered.
Okay. All right, next question is, what recommendations do you have for an agency that is trying to create a useful and also visually stimulating, they're calling it a data board?
A dashboard.
Oh, so yeah, tell us about that.
So if you're going to, first of all, simplicity, right? Too many dashboards I've seen get really complex and really tricked, so then people obviously misinterpret a lot of the data, because remember, you can spin data with any particular angle. And so it just depends on how you want people to interpret it. So I'm all about keeping it simple. And then if you're going to put the dashboard up and you're going to tell a story around the dashboard, put your different charts that normally go on a dashboard, put them up there in such a way that it makes it easy for you to go from left to right, and normal human convention, so it's easy for people to follow that story.
And I would add to that, don't assume people know how to read the dashboard in the way you want to. So in meetings, so with a dashboard, it's kind of, set it and it just, accumulates. But reach out to it. Your story, build a story around it in meetings.
And make sure you put detail in the titles of the different things that they're looking at. Put detail on those charts and graphs and the titles and the descriptions. Because again, people misinterpret this stuff all the time. They make associations between 2 different things that they're seeing on the dashboard that they're connected, when in reality, they might not be connected. And so, again, it's important for you to spell out and connect the dots for your audience. Don't expect them to connect the dots on their own.
Okay, they say pictures are worth 1,000 words, but how much is too much in presenting charts and graphs?
That's a good question. I mean, the only thing I can say about too much is if it's too much for somebody that you're showing it to just to practice, then cut it back. You don't need a lot. Remember, when you're storytelling, you're the focus of the story. The data just supports your story. The data isn't the story. The data supports, so you don't need a lot, and especially if it's a short story. And a lot of times you can use one chart and speak to that chart and tell your story around that chart, especially a chart with a timeline, like a line chart. A line chart, you have the beginning, you have historical data going from XX, you can show relationships between different lines. You don't need a lot of charts if you're doing that kind of thing.
We're at the top of the hour. Let's get one more of these in here, Michael. What recommendations do you have to share a data story with technically oriented people?
Well, that's the magic of the data story. That's the magic of storytelling. It takes people that are non-technical and makes it consumable for them. That's why you tell a story. So you're going to try to stay away from jargon. And buzzwords, right? So jargon and buzzwords are overwhelming to people. And again, if you're going to get them to look at charts as part of your story and data as part of your story, you got to explain it in ways that it's consumable for the average person.
Yeah. So you could conceivably have a story that you're telling to two different audiences, one to very technical people, which will have more complexity potentially than someone to your non-technical audience, where you're going to really focus on single things in the charts and the graphs.
Well, yeah, because your technical audience wants more detail in the data. They want the measurables, where the lay audience, just a general audience, doesn't want to do all that work around the detail. That's not what they want. They want you to tell them what you focused on, how you got there, and what action you want them to take.
Okay, well, fantastic. We are just over our time, so we want to thank you all for attending today and remind you that this was a recorded session, and we will be sending that out to all attendees. The handout that Michael referenced is there, as well as the copy of the slides. And if you are interested in learning more, please visit us, the URL at the Training Center. Michael's full-day class will be on October 24th.
That's correct.
Yeah. So thank you, Michael, for a great presentation. It was entertaining. I had a little bit of fun. I hope you all did too. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and we look forward to having you join us at a future webinar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.